Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto prevented the Fourth Shinobi War. It was their last, desperate gambit. Their last hope. They pinned everything on a prayer that he could save them, and now, he's not even sure if he can make it count anymore. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 1. The war was over. They had lost. It hadn't crept up on them. It hadn't been sudden. Their defeat had not been a great plunge from the heights of uncertainty, where one battle, one event, turned the tide. No. Theirs was the slow death. Victims to a constrictor. The relentless tide of tireless, once dead, foes pushing against the always dwindling resistance. More than the shinobi world, human life itself faced a slow, steady and implacable extinction. Konoha had been the first. After Pain's attack, with no infrastructure to speak of, the village was weakest of all in terms of logistics. Toby had capitalized on that. Using the fact that Konoha had no records, no effective way to organize their forces other than word of mouth down from on high from the Hokage. With the administrative functions so invariably crippled, the Leaf Village soon collapsed, their ninja scattering to group with the other battle groups. IWA was next, after Inoki's death. The old man was so dead set on keeping his seat until someone was worthy to replace him. No one was actually prepared to replace him when the moment came. With all Jounin and Umbu on the front lines, a coordinated effort from Iwagakure's elders couldn't be made to name a replacement. And by the time the new Tsuchikage Kitsuchi had received word of his anointment, the man was neck-deep in an ambush and promptly killed. The immovable rock crumbled beneath the relentless flood. Suna was next. Gaara's power over the Dune Sea had proven absolute, even without the Shikaku. For 30 days the bulk of the enemy forces had descended on Sunagakure, and for 30 days the Sand Village held strong as the rest of the allies regrouped for one final push at the heart of this cancer. Then, inevitably, the White Messenger Hawk had reached them. They were out of time. I had to move before the full force could regroup. Only be returned from Amagakure. Half dead, carrying news of their defeat. A was dead. Now, only Kirigakure, its shores defended by a stretch of sea and its heart protected by dense fog, mountains, and now, thanks to the Seal Master's work, relentless storms that made the oceans come alive with impossible fury like the famed whirlpools of Yuzushi-Ogakure. This alone kept what little of humanity remained safe. For a time. Toby would not be denied though. 10,000 of his creatures were cast back out into the sea. And 1,000 more pushed forward. Kiri fell. And now, here they were, the very last vanguard, the most elite of the elite. Men that had survived endless, unremitting war for the better part of 2 years were guarding their very last, most desperate hope as the enemy forces pounded away at them. It defied the very belief of all human limitations. A marvel of the world. Every manner of seal was calibrated to perfection. Impossibly complex, combining, as a foundation, the recovered Uzumaki designs, coupled with sealing arrays from all corners of the shinobi world for the single most intricate collaboration ever made between the shinobi countries. Barrier seals from IWA, acceleration seals from Kumo, stabilization matrices from Suna, space-time arrays, derived from the summoning animals of Konoha, nature arrays from Kirigakure taken from the vaults of the Shodaime, that had helped create the 7 blades of the swordsman and imbue them with their powers. And lastly, an Uchiha seal array. One based on the displacement of time, derived from the Mangekyo's Tsukiyomi technique. More delicate than any one thing ever made in this world, it was also the most powerful, and their very last prayer for a miracle to deliver them from this nightmare. You have to stop. You've looked over it 8 times already. It has to be perfect. He answered back. I know, but we have no time. Even if you found something, we can't change anything now. You have to dash. It has to be perfect. He repeated, moving towards a different spot, eyes roving over the lines of ink spread out over a room half the size of the Hokage Tower. Built 3 months ago for this exact purpose, the moment this project moved beyond the dreaming stage and became viable due to sheer desperation. There can't be any mistakes. It has to be Naruto. Sakura's hand shot out, gripping him by the bicep and whirling him around to look at her. Bloodshot blue eyes staring into sea green. Naruto, listen to me. You have to stop. You need to focus now. But it has to be I know. She shouted, interrupting him before her voice softened. I know, but we're done. There are no more last-minute fixes. We have to go with what we have now. She's right, Dobe. Sasuke stepped out from the shadows, dark eyes staring at his old teammates. He's here. Points 5 and 6 are down. For is under attack and 3 is setting up its final defenses with Mei now. After that, all we'll have left is the Hachibi. His name is B. Naruto snarled, looking over the array at his feet despite their words. After a tug and a pull, he marched off, moving towards his designated place on the seal, Sasuke and Sakura flanking him. The gold shroud of the Kyuubi's chakra coated his body. From the tips of his hair down to his toes, the golden hue surged through him like a living flame for the first time in months. And it felt joyous. The chakra bled into the seal, dark lines becoming clear, then shining with golden light. The brightness spreading over the whole room, as the chakra went into the seal on the floor to crawl up the walls into the arrays that had been drawn into the overhanging roof. The world was light. Chains sprouted from the walls, floor and ceiling. 9 chains meeting at the center before the bright flame of the Kyuubi's chakra spread into them, lighting them like tinder that did not burn as energy forked and split between the links to meet in the center. The crackle of power sent goosebumps crawling up his arms. Like static electricity, only without the harsh sting. He pushed his and Kurama's chakra into the seal, willing this to work. It had to. Then there was a tear. All 9 chains pulled taut, retreating back into their seals, linked by agonizingly slow link, with the tear becoming wider and wider, the fabric of reality split open to reveal an abyss of impossibility. It looked like an ocean of churning water in a storm, a spiral of black non-light, a surface as still as a tombstone, the brightest of starlight, the most vibrant of colors, all at the same time, his mind unable or unwilling to attempt to grasp even the concept of what he was looking at. An end to infinity. I can't believe we did it. He whispered to himself, even knowing that this was the easy part. Beside him, Sakura threw a look. Sasuke nodded. In the next second, Naruto's body was wrapped in a flutter of sealing note pages, with a single scroll coiling around his body. What? He asked, startled as the golden chakra receded back into his seal. He hunched forward, the sudden loss of strength leaving him as he saw the dark, fiery body of the Susanoo form up around him like the walls of an impenetrable fortress. Sasuke. He turned his head to look at the Uchiha. What are you doing? What we have to. He answered. We have to get you through. Sakura said, walking up beside him. He turned, looking at her, his mind processing what they were saying, a slowly creeping horror dawning on his features. No. He whispered, demanded. No. You said that, I lied. She confessed sadly. My calculations always showed that you nor Kyuubi would ever have the power to pull yourself and us back far enough to make enough of a difference. You just pulling back yourself, you'd only be able to get yourself to the very beginning of the war. Naruto's wide, unblinking eyes percolated with tears, his face slack with dumb shock even as Sasuke stepped in front of him, his back to the Jinchuriki, facing the doorway. All our research shows every step is an exponential increase. The Uchiha said. At the first step, you only take 1 day. On the second 2. On the third 4. Fifth 8 and so on. There are 4,380 days in 12 years. With the exponential growth, we need 11 steps. We can make that. The blonde cried, struggling in his bonds before turning to Sakura, a look of such betrayal in his eyes she felt her heart clench in her chest. You told me I could make that. I lied. She repeated. So how many can I make? If he was close, then. At the very best estimates, you can only make 8, and that's if all our calculations are on the marker. We could be completely wrong. He shook his head, the tears dripping down his cheeks to fall off his chin. No. No. I'll get you there. I'll get you there. Sakura. She shook her head, a brittle smile tugging at her lips. Naruto. She sighed. Sighed. You don't know how much. There were the sounds of shouts now. Of battle reaching in through the outside walls. We have no time. Sasuke demanded, turning to give her a look over his shoulder. She nodded, turning away from Naruto to march in front of Sasuke as the Uchiha reached out, both hands, one to grip her shoulder, the other to grip Naruto's. She reached down, a burst of chakra into the activation rune as tattoos spread from the seal on her forehead to spread over her skin. She did not have years' worth of chakra like Tsunade-sama. Just barely one, it would have to be enough. The doorway, held open by the 9 chains, thrummed with power, the 9 links spinning like a typhoon, faster and faster, the seals at their feet becoming brighter. Then they were somewhere else. On the edge of nothingness. Sakura felt ground under her feet, sweat beading at her brow as the very perception of all her 5 senses were thrown completely askew. Heat, light, dark, up, down, nothing conformed to her ability to comprehend. She closed her eyes, focusing on Sasuke's hand on her shoulder and ignoring Naruto's struggles in his attempts to escape his restraints. She stood nowhere and everywhere. Her chakra, her tether of life, anchoring her to this place like she would tether herself to the side of a tree or on a wall. That was the only way it could work. Once she was finished, Sasuke would begin to do the same, so that he could navigate this place that led to nowhere and everywhere at once. This vast void of nothingness that held the whole of everything within your reach and just beyond. She took one step forward, tugging Sasuke with her, and felt her chakra drain out of her. As though the very breath of life fled her body, she hunched over, vomiting, even as her feet stayed rooted to the ground, not daring to move. She felt Sasuke grip her shoulder, her chakra flowing into him, feeding the massive construct known as Susanoo in his place. Sakura! Sakura! She heard Naruto shout, no doubt struggling even more. She didn't dare look back. Didn't dare look at the hurt, desperate look in his eyes. She tried to smile. It was a brittle thing. Sayonara. Sasuke, Naruto. She felt the Uchiha's hand squeeze her shoulder. She took one more step. The last of her chakra drained from her body. She died with barely the whisper of a final breath, the final tether of life sapped from her body, as she took a single step into nowhere, and she faded into the nothingness of the void of time. Sasuke's chakra surged, and the Uchiha could now feel his feet touch the ground, tugged into this place in the expanse of time by his now dead, or was it perhaps lost, teammate. Damn it. The Uchiha ignored Naruto's curse, eyes staring straight ahead. 3. He breathed, taking one more step. Instantly, a massive crack thundered through the skull of Susanoo, and Sasuke felt his chakra get sapped from him just like Sakura had. His massive reserves would hold out for another 2 steps under the aegis of the legendary ninjutsu, 3 if he were lucky. 4. He said. One more step, and this time the flames of Susanoo's body dimmed, becoming little more than embers, leaving only the raw chakra construct exposed, with another crack spearing down its chest. Sasuke hissed, reeling as his eyes bled and fire spread through his insides. That's enough. Naruto growled, his voice obviously choked. That's 4. I can get you the rest of the way. Stop. The Uchiha shook his head, eyes bleeding now though Naruto couldn't see it. Have to, make sure, dobe. One more step. This time the legendary construct began crumbling away, the last of the flames dying as the chakra armor was peeled free. Sasuke hunched over, coughing up dark red blood that turned to dust on the winds of time. "Stop it, Sasuke!" Naruto shouted. "I'll take you, just get me out of this. The Uchiha sighed, coughing wetly. "We could have miscalculated, Naruto. We have nothing to dash." "I don't care," he roared, wisps of gold emerging between the seals as Sasuke's chakra waned dangerously on the restraints. "Let me out." Sasuke turned to look over his shoulder, staring with bloody tears at the struggling blonde even as he dragged him. The Uchiha smirked. It was a brittle thing. "For what it's worth." He paused, visibly choking down the words. "Cursed pride. I always did have to carry your sorry ass through." Before the shout even escaped Naruto's throat, Sasuke took that one final step. Susanoo burst into shards of light. Unlike Sakura, girded from the worst of this place by the legendary sword and shield of the Mangekyo, allowed to fade away into this place beyond time, Sasuke had no such defense now, and Naruto watched the Uchiha get ripped to pieces. Like a great sandstorm had swept in and peeled the flesh clean off his body before grinding the bones to dust. The paper around him fell away crumbling to sand. The Kyuubi's chakra, so desperate to escape, roared to life as the blonde cried, howling into the void as he clutched at his head, screaming in wild agony. All of them, they were, all of them. Every last one of his precious people. He cried, clutching and pulling at his hair as he screamed at nothing, at everything. Rage, hatred, sadness, despair. They rushed through him, too powerful to resist, too fast to feel. All he knew was pain. "You have to move, Naruto." The blonde didn't respond, still staring at the place in this black abyss that he'd last seen Sasuke, sobbing as he bit his lip hard enough to bleed, the blood crystallizing frozen as it was swept away. "Naruto." Kyuubi prodded, his voice a low rumble. "You have to keep moving now." The blonde swallowed. Fat tears evaporating as they escaped his tear ducts. He took one step. He felt the same enormous drain they had. He took one more. Now, the cloak flickered. When he took his third, the golden hue of his aura vanished, leaving only red, 8 tails trailing behind him. He took one more. 2 tails receded back into him. "Kyuubi?" They were right, there was one thing we did not take into account. "What?" "The temporal displacement between us and the seal. 11 paces in physical distance, years time difference. My chakra must push through the years to reach it. 3 paces left, 6 tails." Naruto swallowed. Too numb to do much more. "Are we going to die?" "No. Walk." He took another step. 3 tails vanished. 9 paces. One more. The last of the kitsune's tails receded back into him, the chakra shroud of the 9 tails vanishing, leaving Naruto's flesh to peel away, only to reform in patches and bursts of healing. The blonde grit his teeth, hissing as he kept his feet firmly planted in this place, not daring to move one more step. "Kyuubi? Move. Stupid ninjin. It's you, you're going to die here too, aren't you? Kyuubi? Take your step, boy." He opened his eyes to a ceiling he hadn't seen for what felt like a lifetime. For a window of eternity, he stared into that chipped, water bubble paint, smelling his poorly washed sheets, listening to the sounds of Konoha's early morning, utterly motionless. When he finally moved, the sun was rising along the horizon, filtering light in through the blinds of his window. His feet touched the floor, all too small, the leap a little too high. He stumbled, wobbling on unsure legs. He stared at his hands, at himself as best he could. Then he kept walking. When he made it to the bathroom, he found a stepping stool. The same stupid stepping stool he had thrown in a corner somewhere, never to use again after he hit 7. It was right there, waiting to be used now. He looked up at his bathroom counter, stepping onto the stool. He looked in the mirror, staring back at his face. His 4-year-old face. Like he'd been in his bed, he remained motionless, staring for the longest time at this reflection that shouldn't be. At this thing that was just so wrong. QB? 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 His eyes glimmered, percolating with tears that didn't quite fall yet, as he stared into this stranger in a strange house. Please say something to me. He never noticed himself crying, never noticed his legs give out, never noticed himself falling onto the floor, never noticed his choking sobs or his hysterical screams. He didn't even notice when Inu barged into the room, grabbing him and holding him close as he shouted out orders to the rest of the squad. All he could notice was how quiet it was. Chapter 2. What happened? The Sandaime Hokage asked as he marched through the white halls of the Konoha hospital. Unknown. Inu replied. He slept as usual, woke up, marched to the bathroom, then he started screaming. The legendary shinobi shot off question after question, as he walked, barely waiting for the response to be over before launching into his next one. Genjutsu? None that I could detect. Poisons? Hallucinogens? Initial results are negative. More thorough testing is being conducted as we speak, Hokage-sama. Current status? The seal's integrity? Stable as far as we can tell, on both counts, though we've called in the expert in order to verify. The old monkey nodded, about to ask another question before he heard the sound of a struggle. His and Inu's heads jerked up ever so slightly before they were both rushing down the hallway, the Umbu's sword emerging from its scabbard with a glint of polished steel. The door was thrown open to reveal two nurses, a doctor and four Umbu lined up in front of them, forming a semicircle around a blonde child clutching a surgical blade to his chest. What happened? Hiruzen questioned, his voice unchanged from its usual calm tone. He woke up and started struggling. Hokage-sama. One of the Umbu answered. He took Dr. Koku's scalpel from his coat pocket. Cut me good when I tried to grab him too. Another Umbu, a younger one, said, showing off the blood-drenched glove on his left hand, an open gash in his palm. He's fast. Old man? The Jinchuriki's frightened voice brought Sara's eyes to him, the soft brown orbs softening their placid look to one of mild concern. He stepped forward, past the line of people to get in close to the boy before he knelt in front of him. Naruto-chan. He cooed at the 4-year-old holding out his hand. Naruto-chan, come here. The boy's white-knuckled grip on the surgical knife tightened even further, and for a brief instant he thought the child might actually try to strike out at him. Then the boy launched himself forward with a hysterical cry, hugging the Sandaime so fiercely Sarutobi could actually feel his robe ready to tear as the toddler cried into his chest, babbling nonsense he couldn't understand. Only one thing stood out. They're gone. They're all gone. Who they were and where they could have gone, the Hokage didn't hold the foggiest notion. Picking up the boy, he whispered softly, trying to calm him as he stared straight at Inu, his top Umbu already taking up the assignment as he signaled orders to his men. Naruto's apartment and habitual locations would be searched thoroughly for any clues that could be found. Waving the doctor away, Sarutobi commandeered a stiff-backed chair, settling himself down with Naruto still crying all over him. The Sandaime took a breath, letting himself sigh as he waited for the boy's hysterics to calm. He shouldn't have been surprised when Naruto's sniffles finally faded into restless sleep, the boy's features scrunched up in discomfort. He considered waking him, but in the end, decided it'd be best to simply ask the boy tomorrow. He doubted he'd just forget. Suddenly the door opened, revealing Sarutobi's old student, bringing a weary smile to the aging Kage's face. Is he all right? The Sannin asked, stepping into the room and plucking the child out of Sarutobi's arms to place him on the bed, hands raising his shirt to find the seal on his navel. Physically he's fine, but as for what happened to trigger these emotions, we cannot say. Sarutobi admitted. Half of me is starting to think this was just one very vivid nightmare. Perhaps I should call Dash. This was no nightmare. His student flatly interrupted. That turned Sarutobi's face into hard, chiseled stone. All laxity vanishing at the man's voice. What's wrong? The seal's empty. The QB's gone. It was 20 minutes later that Sarutobi found himself marching into the bowels of Konoha's interrogation department. Naruto lay blissfully asleep, wheeled through on a hospital bed, kept unconscious by influence of a genjutsu. This day had gone from routine, to worrying, to downright terrifying, and he needed answers, and he needed them now. Out of a side hallway, Inoichi, half delirious, still waking from whatever sleep his men had dragged him out of, stumbled into view, still visibly trying to get his bearings before Sarutobi grabbed him by the shoulder and all but shoved him towards the direction they were walking. Prepare yourself for a mind walk, the Hokage demanded brusquely. I need to know what he's done, I need to know where he's been, who he's been with, what he's been eating, right down to how many times the boys breathed today. Inoichi, knowing better than to argue, the Yamanaka clan head simply nodded, following the group in his sleepwear. By the time they reached the chamber, Inoichi was fully awake, barely even taking his place at the foot of the bed before he formed his hand seals. 3 seconds later his eyes opened, a bewildered expression decorating his face. What's wrong? His brain, it's... The elder Yamanaka actually seemed to be struggling to find the words. Twisted. What exactly does that mean? It's like, pretend his mind is a stick, straight and thin, you follow it in one direction, and leave in one direction. Now toss 100 other sticks that look and feel the same, but with subtle differences, on top of it, group them together, mix them up, and now try to find the exact same stick you had originally. It'll be near impossible. What could do that? I have no idea. Then get an idea. I have a continent's worth of suspects right now, and I need that list narrowed. So either think of something or walk in there and find out what happened. I can't do a mind walk like this. I follow the memories, then follow them back. Trying to go in here, I'd risk just trailing off the path, so to speak, in either going forward or coming back. It could lead to false information, me getting stuck in his subconscious psyche for far longer than would be healthy for either of us. And that's just the better outcomes of a botched mind walk. Whoever you're looking for evidently knows enough about Yamanaka clan techniques to devise this pretty ingenious counter. It's as though someone fabricated an entirely new psyche and drove it into his skull. My suggestion is to look through any records you have regarding people that know mind manipulation techniques. And pray it's not something someone came up with on their own. The professor all but hissed before turning to look at the Umbu to his left. Tell Inu to widen his search parameters to include long-term village residents. This could be a domestic case where someone found access to the Yamanaka clan scrolls. Inoichi gulped, catching the Hokage's eye but not daring to say a single thing. The message was clear. His clan was now under heavy scrutiny as well. If something didn't fall into its place in the investigation, well, he didn't really want to think about that. Just then another of the Umbu had the courtesy to step into the room in full view before approaching the Hokage. Sir, we've discovered something. Speak. The village barrier teams reported an anomaly. Their most sensitive sensor Nin could feel it for an instant. They couldn't identify what it was but investigate further. Cross-reference with patrol groups of Chun and see if anyone reported anything odd last night. At once. Hokage-sama. Inoichi stepped forward. We should tread very carefully with Uzumaki-san. If I'm right and this new fabrication of memories is right on top of his old ones, he could be very confused when he wakes up. That would explain why he attacked one of my Umbu. The Sandame hummed. Soon enough his real memories should prove more formidable than these new fabrications, but until then his behavior might be a little erratic. I suggest when he wakes up you be there, along with some familiar faces if possible. The aging Hokage nodded. I'll see to it, Inoichi. The cage is empty. The massive bars that had loomed over him years ago when he first stepped foot into this place still stand. Only they hold vigil over a hollow. There is nothing within. There is only the churning water beneath his feet, the echoes of its sound bouncing off the cold walls. He cannot see Kurama. He cannot hear him. He can't even feel an echo of his presence. His friend is gone without so much as a footprint to have ever indicated he was here. When Naruto opened his eyes, the sun was already high in the sky, the light filtering in from the outside world. He pushed himself up to a sitting position, groaning at the stiff soreness in his joints and muscles. Rubbing at puffy, tear-crusted eyes as his thoughts tried to organize themselves. He looked down at his two small hands, looked at this room that just seemed too big. He was here. He was alive, and he was here. And they were all gone. Why hadn't they told him? Why? He could have tried to push the channeling seals more. Refined the displacement matrix, tried to integrate some kind of chakra storage seal into the design. He could have done something. Why didn't they fucking tell him? His hands clenched into tight fists. A white-knuckled grip as his fingers clenches so hard his nails threaten to break the skin. But only threaten. He can't even do that anymore. He sobs, the fury and strength leached out of him, leaving only despair. Not even Kurama. And now he's here. Alone again. There's a hand grasping his and Naruto jerks, startled to realize someone had snuck up on him. It had been a while since people could do that. He looks up, expecting to see a nurse only to find a surprising face. Baa-chan. Tsunade, as young and beautiful as ever, frowned. What happened to Tsunade ne Naruto-chan? Naruto blinked, confused. He'd never known Tsunade when he was a kid. Did he? The blonde woman's lips pursed. These memory issues must be pretty bad. She muttered to herself before sitting down on the bed at his feet. What do you remember about me, kiddo? She asked even as her hands glowed with that familiar scanning technique as she hovered her hands over him. You're Tsunade Baa nay. She nodded, chocolate orbs observing him carefully. And you dash he paused, noticing something. Hey, where's your necklace? The slug Sannin blinked. My what now? Your necklace. That green jewel. The showdame's necklace, where is it? I don't have it, so you should. Naruto, that necklace belongs to Dan. You've seen him wearing it forever. Naruto felt himself reeling, straightening on the bed as he stared at her. That Dan guy's alive? Now it was Tsunade whose face seemed to go slack with shock. That Dan. Naruto, he took you and Shizun to see Koyuki Kazana's latest movie last week. The two sat in mutual disbelief for a moment before Tsunade huffed, resuming her scan. When they find whoever screwed with your kiddo, they better give me 10 good minutes alone with them. Naruto sat confused and bewildered. Now he knew something was wrong. Even if Tsunade hadn't left until after he was born, something he highly doubted, and they simply hadn't met before, there was no way that Dan guy should still be alive right now. His mind wandered back, trying to recall all that was said when they were designing the seal. Wishing, not for the last time, that he could have someone smarter than him that he could talk with. They were supposed to be a team. Could things have changed? Sasuke, Sakura, and he spent months talking about all the changes any misstep could bring, but their discussions had only been about changes after the point of their arrival, not before. But could just them coming back in the first place, by itself, change things? It was unnatural. Something like this had never happened before, so trying to theorize about its effects had been something akin to shooting at the sky praying to hit something on the way down. It had been a miracle they got as close as they did. If things had changed, how many? How far? How drastic? How the hell could he prepare for Tobi, or Obito, or whatever the hell he called himself, without his friends? Without Kurama? And without even the goddamn security of at least having an idea about what could happen. Naruto. He came back to the waking world with Tsunade hovering over him, his heart pounding in his chest and blood rushing through his ears, the gentle eddies of her healing chakra washing over his small body. What the hell is wrong with you? I have to get out of here, he said, moving to sit up again when Tsunade's hand shoved him back down. You're a 4-year-old kid who all but had a panic attack not 2 feet away from me. You're not going anywhere until you explain what you're thinking about right now. He let out a laugh, a quick bubble of hysteria that threatened to keep going before he reined it in. Explain? Oh yeah, he'll get right on that. Just give him 12 years to get back to the point they've got to do this again, and he'll jot down all his notes for her. He laughed a little more. Tsunade's face showed genuine concern. Come on kid, stop. You're really scaring me now. That sobered him up, but the lack of illogical euphoria left him only with the crushing anxiety of this whole debacle. I'm sorry BAA, Nei-chan. We've found nothing. That's not like you, Inu. Do you need another 24 hours? There is nothing, Hokage-sama. Inu assured. He spoke to no one unusual. The toxicology reports came back negative. Hyuga have looked over his chakra network to check for any recent manipulations. All visitors within the last week have checked out, everyone he spoke to checked out. The only lead we have to go on is that minor barrier fluctuation, and no one in the core knows what that could be. I cannot ask you to stop searching. I understand. I'm just informing you that at this stage, the likelihood of us finding anything is nearly negligible. Just do everything possible. Leave nothing unturned. In the meantime, I want you to devote yourself and your best ANBU to guard Naruto at all times until further notice. You'll work in shifts. The rest of your men will hunt down a list of all possible mind manipulators outside of Konoha. Someone on this continent knows something. Understood. Inu vanished in a swirl of leaves. You're pushing him hard. The Sandame's second and remaining student commented with a grin as he stepped out of a nearby wall with a smirk. Sarutobi kept walking, approaching the door. There has to be an explanation. If not, they managed to infiltrate every layer of our village defenses completely undetected. Even I would have trouble to do something like that, and I designed the system. Her eyes moved to the door for a second, and it was enough to warn Naruto that someone else was coming a second before the door opened. Not they managed to infiltrate every layer of our village defenses completely undetected. Even I would have trouble to do something like that, and I designed the system. The Sandame said to someone before stepping into the room, smiling gently at the boy on the bed. Naruto-chan. Naruto smiled, genuine relief filling his face at something wholly familiar and long missed. GG. Then the smile dropped from his face, the fear gripping him as the unmistakable form of the snake Sannin stepped through the doorways, a gentle little smile tugging at his own features. Hello Naruto-kun. It didn't take Inoichi to see the sudden tension that gripped the boy, and it was Tsunade that spoke. Naruto, you remember Oro-kun, don't you? Naruto licked his lips, swallowing as he nodded, still glaring at the man. I do. Tsunade frowned, turning to look over her shoulder. These memory issues seemed to range, and whoever did this was really good. Other than his hostility to me, what other odd behavior has he shown? The snake Sannin questioned, crossing his arms with one hand on his chin, curious. He thought Dan was dead, seemed to have completely forgotten about him, like he never even existed for the last 4 years. That made the snake Sannin raise a slender eyebrow. Tsunade nodded. My reaction too. The only one whose memory seems to be unaltered is Sensei. Even that might not be true on further inquiry. Be glad, Sensei. Your enemies haven't stooped so low as to turn the aggression of a toddler on you. Sarutobi gave a short chuckle from somewhere in his throat. Okay, look. Naruto said, scratching at his head in frustration. I remember Ero Sennin, so let's just bring him here too. Ero who now? Tsunade glared. Jiraiya. Immediately, Naruto knew something was wrong. All 3 of the room's occupants went stiff with shock, Tsunade went pale, and even Orochimaru seemed as though he'd just been sucker punched. Naruto. Sarutobi began, choking on the words. Jiraiya's been dead for almost 20 years. Chapter 3. He was dead. Dead, killing Hattori Hanzo. The true shinobi of AIM and the last Toad Sage cut each other down in the final days of the last Great War. He'd asked how, but neither Tsunade nor Orochi team seemed to be willing to cough up information. So, he'd gone to the library hoping to find something on public record. He found very little. The bare bones of a romanticized account that depicted the old pervert fighting Hanzo to the end in order to defend his injured teammates. In the end, they managed to kill each other. If he didn't know any better, he'd say the old bastard wrote it himself. He sniffed, closing the book with a snap before pushing it aside. Shinobi records were sealed, and public records sucked. They didn't say how he died, what techniques were used. They didn't even say where the man was buried. He pulled closer another book. This one on history. He needed to find out just how many things stayed the same, and how far this ripple effect thing went. Jiraiya. Calm down. You fucking calm down. She screeched, still pacing the length of the Sarutobi's office. Someone stuck. How the hell did they dash? Just shut up. The snake Sannin barked, his own agitation shining through. Let's stop and think before you bust down 10 walls with no purpose and actually make use of this. Indeed. Sarutobi agreed, stepping into his office, a file under his arm. Naruto-chan's revelation narrows down our list of suspects considerably. Anyone who was close enough to Jiraiya to know his personality and appearance. The snake surmised. Exactly. He opened the file as he sat down. That almost certainly means a domestic enemy. We'll look into it, Tsunade assured, her clenched fists cracking as she tightened her grip. Sara would pity whomever they eventually tracked down, if he didn't feel exactly the same way. To use Jiraiya to twist a boy's memories and simultaneously betray the village. This person, whoever he or she was, had gained 3 very powerful enemies. I'll be making some inquiries into my spies from AIM in the meanwhile. Orochimaru nodded. Many of their countrymen still hold a great hatred for what Jiraiya did, and could have strived to do something like this. Do it. Even if you run a dead end, we've been too lax on AIM's activities recently. We need more intel. Either way, I'll make my next statement to both of you. In your mutual investigations, do not forget about Naruto himself. He'll need our help after what he's experienced, and I can't be there as often as I'd like. You two were always close with him. Have faith that he'll remember that soon. Tsunade nodded. Yeah. I'll bring Dan to see him when he gets back. Maybe that'll jog something. Orochimaru smirked. He might throw one of his toy kunai at me if I get too close. Getting scared of a toddler, Orokuan? The female in the room laughed. Terrified, he quipped, smiling for a moment before becoming serious again. Don't worry, Sensei, the boy's strong for his age. He'll be fine. In a few days he'll be right back to normal. I hope so. The old monkey confessed as he lit his pipe, then he waved them both away. Go. You have your orders. Taicho. Inu's head turned ever so slightly, finding the new arrival through the slit eyeholes of his mask. You're here early. Before I assume my duties, it would be best if I were fully briefed on the situation, she said, kneeling beside him, assuming a perch on the tall library bookshelf to look down at the 4-year-old child. He's suffering memory issues, and we might be seeing the first ramifications of it. How so? She asked. When was the last time you saw a 4-year-old reading through history books in the library? Furthermore, he's comprehending. Evidently, the experience of these false memories might have given him an increased intelligence. Our experiences shape us, she affirmed. Adding experiences, even false ones, must have affected him. Inu nodded, then leaned a little forward. Looks like he found something that doesn't really match up with what he knew. The blond boy picked up the heavy book, struggling with its weight as he all but ran towards the librarian's desk. Is this right? Naruto all but shouted, pushing the book up onto the desk, startling the elderly man sitting by piece of furniture. The older man blinked, pushing his thick reading glasses onto the bridge of his nose, leaning forward and taking the book in hand. Which part, young man? Naruto marched around the desk, pushing through the swiveling doors to stand next to the man as he brought the book down to his eye level. He pointed a little finger, pressing it against a paragraph. This part right here. The man brought the book close to his face, reading over the identified paragraph. After a moment the man nodded. Yes, it is. What seems to be the problem? Naruto swallowed, smiling after a moment as he held out his hand to take back the book. Nothing, just wanted to make sure. The old man nodded, handing the book back. Inu's head tilted. Wonder what he found that's so interesting. The woman beside him shrugged. We can find out later. He nodded, his body beginning to vanish into wisps of smoke. I'll leave to get some rest, be seeing you. She set herself onto a more comfortable position, watching as the little blonde sat down once again in his previous seat. Naruto meanwhile smiled as he sat down, reading over the paragraph once again just for that smile to stay on his face. It was Hashirama Senju and Uchiha Madara that founded Konoha, allying the powerful Senju and Uchiha clans and uniting the clans that were based around the continent's central region. While their respective Makudan and Sharingan bloodlines were extremely powerful, it does not appear at this time that any of their descendants have inherited their Kiki Igenkai. An Uchiha clan without the Sharingan? It was no guarantee Tobi hadn't manifested the thing or stolen it, but this had the potential to make things far less complicated. He kept on reading. It was night when he finally stepped out of the library's halls, shivering in the cold evening air, regretting the fact that he hadn't brought a jacket with him. Suddenly he felt a weight settle on his shoulders, stumbling forward a little as it settled before he looked to see someone had placed a thick, orange coat over his shoulders. He looked to thank whoever it was when the words died on his lips, replaced by a frown and a glare. Orochimaru raised a slender eyebrow. Should I assume you don't like this coat anymore? He asked, a note of glibness in his tone. What are you doing here? When I heard you were out here without a coat, I was behooved to bring one to you. Naruto blinked. Behooved by who? Tsunade, of course. He pointed and Naruto turned to look, finding a slug resting on the branch of a nearby tree. She's busy at the hospital, or she would have come herself. He commented. Come. I'll walk you home, and you can answer some of my questions. One of which being how you know what behoove means. No thanks. Naruto said, turning to walk the long way home. I'll dash. Snakes slithered around his waist, coiling tightly and lifting, leaving his little legs dangling in the air. I insist, let's talk you and I. The snake drawled, pulling him up to his side as he marched down the road. The youth struggled, hands pulling and pushing at the snakes, but with the limbs of a 4-year-old he might as well have been trying to bend steel. So, what did they stick in your head that's gotten you so riled up about me, Naruto-kun? He asked as though commenting on the encroaching winter. You're a creepy bastard, that's what. Let me out of this. Evidently they also taught you some more colorful words to go along with behoove to your limited repertoire. All right then. Let's not talk about me. What fabrications did they stick in your head about Jiraiya? What's it matters to you anyway? Naruto glowered, arms crossed now, having given up on freeing himself. Don't pretend like you gave a dash. Orochimaru stopped, standing still in the road as he turned to look at Naruto, the serpentine yellow eyes boring a hole into the boy's skull. Naruto-kun. You're young and confused. You can count that as your saving grace, or you'd be in a great deal of pain right now. The blonde met the serpent's gaze, blinking in curious bewilderment. Orochimaru turned and kept on walking, waiting for a moment before speaking again. Now tell me. What was it they stuck in that head of yours about Jiraiya? Naruto looked down, considering whether he should answer or not. Finally, he did speak. Aro Sennin was always peeping on girls in the hot springs. Ha! The snake barked out a laugh. That does sound like him. What did he look like in these memories of yours? Big, taller than anyone else in the village, except maybe Chuji's dad Dash. Chuji? Akimichi. White hair that he could make into a personal shield. Dressed up like a kabuki, with sandals and everything. A smirk graced the pale man's face, one born of seemingly fond remembrance. He was also the first one that taught me the water walking and summoning dash. Orochimaru stopped again, turning to look at him. Taught you? You learned how to manipulate chakra? That made Naruto pause, hesitating for a moment before his mind came to a hasty decision, a quick plan forming in his head as he deduced where this could lead. Yeah. The snake set him down, uncoiling from his waist. Show me. The man demanded. With a thought, Naruto pushed Chakra to his feet. Seeing that her charge was in the safe hands of Konoha's snake summoner, the young woman that had been tailing them pulled away, doubling back towards the librarian, who was beginning to gather his things as she approached, making as much noise as possible so as to not give the man a heart attack. When he looked up, he was visibly startled to see one of Konoha's normally unseen special operators standing in front of him. The boy who was here. He asked you about a book. What was he inquiring about? Naruto struggled to focus, his underdeveloped coils trying to adapt to this new strain he was putting on them. He raised up his foot, about to place it on the wall before the Sannin's voice stopped him. You're using too much. This is what I always used. He protested, putting his foot down. Your memories are on the right track, but your body doesn't know what it's doing. He shot back, placing a hand on his chin. Still, this is interesting. You mentioned summoning, show me the seals. And Naruto formed them, watching Orochimaru's curious face as he did. The Sannin knelt, getting himself at eye level with the youth, pulling out a kunai from his pouch and offering it hilt first. How well can you throw one of these? Naruto grinned and Orochimaru could tell it was false. The boy was manipulating him, or trying to. Failing miserably, but the effort was there. How about you and I make a deal? He asked. The snake raised a slender eyebrow. He had a feeling he knew where this was going. It was the next morning that Sarutobi found himself in his office, reading over a series of files discussing a zoning dispute between the Hyuga and the Akimichi clans when the door to his office opened, revealing his pale-skinned student. Orochimaru, what can I do for you? Not mincing words, the man smirked in that familiar way of his. I'm here to nominate Uzumaki Naruto for early academy enrollment. Chapter 4. Officially, nominating a child for early academy enrollment was not, in truth, that big of a deal. The child had been discovered to possess a high degree of proficiency or raw talent in one or various shinobi arts, and, as a military state, the village policy was to hone these abilities early so as not to let them go to waste or be lost due to a normal civilian life being unable to nurse these prodigious talents adequately. Unofficially, Naruto was discovering, it was like painting a neon sign over the kid's head. He should have guessed, really. The two people he knew about from his time period that had gotten an early nomination were Kakashi-sensei and Itachi, and both were comparable monsters when measured against the run-of-the-mill shinobi. It wasn't done often. Not only was it difficult to find a child with actual talent beyond mere hopes and dreams, but the person that nominated them risked a lot of his own reputation/prestige. If the nominee turned out to be average, or worse yet, subpar, or even injured in the tests of the academy, then that person was branded, at the bare minimum, reckless. Both Itachi and Kakashi had been nominated by members of their own families. But he, the resident Jinchuriki, being nominated by the recluse that was the Snake Sannin, had come, as far as most could tell, completely out of left field, and made a lot of civilians and quite a few shinobi curious, and rumors were already starting to float around. None of which were true. Naruto wouldn't trust that serpent as far as he could throw him, which in his present state wasn't very far at all. The only reason he'd chosen him over the others was because, well, he was there. And now he was in a rush. He had to start climbing the shinobi ladder early. The higher his rank, the more techniques he'd have access to, the more doors he'd be able to open, the more clearance he'd have. More clearance meant more information, and he needed information. That was the key to finding Toby. He only knew the vaguest of Toby's acts before the war had broken out. It hadn't mattered to him where the hell the Uchiha had come from, only what he could do to stop him. And by the time their little plan of going back in time saw itself pushed from the aspect of pipe dream to necessity, anyone that could have possibly answered such questions were long since dead or enemies, or both. And more than that, he needed to get to Toby before he managed to achieve the insane level of strength he'd gotten during the war. He needed to warn the Jinchuriki about him. Him and maybe Akatsuki too if they still existed. He finished off his breakfast, tossing the dish in the sink, promising to clean it out later before he made for the door, ready to leave when he heard a knock. He paused, blinking, wondering who it would be as he reached for the kunai and shuriken pouches to strap them on. They'd been given to him, courtesy of Sarutobi. Be right there, old man. The door opened, no doubt picked with chakra. I'm not that old, kiddo. The voice was unfamiliar, and Naruto quickly looked up, finding a smiling silver-haired man. Ah, who are you? The man's face fell. Whoa, Suchan warned me, but that's a real kick to the gut, kiddo. It's me. Dan. Naruto blinked. So, this the one Tsunade had been so hung up on. I thought you'd be taller. The blonde found himself saying before thinking. Me too. He shot back with an easy grin. But alas, humans don't grow on hopes and dreams. Which reminds me. Have you been eating fruits and vegetables like Tsuchan told you last time we were here? I guess. You have that refrigerator stuffed with ramen, don't you? There's cereal in there. He defended. Dan walked him to the academy. It was a novel experience. And no, that wasn't a euphemism. It was actually a novel experience. He'd never had someone walk him to the academy grounds. The Hokage occasionally saw him before he left his apartment when he could spare the time, but those times were few and far between, and even then, he had to head to the tower, not to the academy, which was a bit out of the way from his destination, so having someone walk him the whole way there was a real change of pace. And the company was actually nice to boot. It didn't take him long to realize Dan was a joker. He always had a ready comeback or witty comment. It kinda reminded him of Jiraiya. Though Ero-sen intended to be more dry sarcasm than witty quips. Ah, my two princesses. The silver-haired man said, drawing Naruto's attention enough for him to find Tsunade and a much younger Shizune. But I really am sick. Oh, bull to the shit. The slug princess shot back. You just don't want to go on the first day. We never do anything on the first day. You get to say hi to all those wonderful people you'll be spending the rest of the year with. I say hi to them all the time anyway. It's not like we can lose each other inside this village. You get to say hi to the teachers then. I don't want to say hi to the teachers. That's half the objective here. Tough luck then. He didn't remember Shizune Nichin talking back to Tsunade, ever, even when she deserved it. Now Shurchan. You wouldn't want to leave Naruto here alone on his first day, would you? What about all those voracious little aspiring kunoichi he'll have to contend with? Dan's voice announced their arrival to Shizune, who turned around with a smirk for both of them. Hey Uncle Dan, hi Naruto-chan. Her smile fell a bit when she noticed his sad face. What's wrong? Naruto blinked for a moment, staring at her face, and struggled in those seconds to push away the memory of her eyes open in death, of red blood staining her pale skin. At those same eyes staring back at him from the opposite side of a battlefield. He smiled as brightly as he could, greeting this expression like an old friend, one he hadn't seen or needed in a long time. Hey Shizune Nichin. He stepped forward and hugged her, barely reaching her waist as she patted his hair. A lump formed in his throat at the familiar gesture. Those kunoichi will have to deal with me before Shizune gets a crack at them. He heard Tsunade vow, and heard the swat of her hand against Dan's arm. And don't you go sticking ideas in his head either. The man chuckled. Naruto let go of Shizun before the hug became awkward, looking up at the building. Was Irika-sensei here yet? Or was that not going to happen at all? It had been so long since he'd come around here. It had been so long since this place was around to come to. He felt a hand on his shoulder, turning to see Tsunade standing beside him, a serious frown on her face. You okay, kiddo? Once more he smiled. Yeah, just nervous. Tsunade's frown grew a little deeper. You can wait, you know. I'll talk things over with Orokuan and Dash. No. He interrupted, his voice pitching with the high notes of a 4-year-old. No. I can do it. We know you can. This voice was familiar, and as far as he was concerned, still unwelcome. The whole group turned to find Orochimaru standing not 5 feet away, seemingly conjuring himself from thin air, smiling with that serpentine upturn of his lips. Have a little faith, Tsuchan. He drawled. I wouldn't have nominated little Naruto if I didn't know he could handle it. He might be able to handle it, but that doesn't mean he needs to. He's 4. And Naruto could tell as the Sannin shrugged that this was simply retracing the steps of an argument the two had held previously. They were Sannin, so neither of them would budge, one way or the other. Orochimaru looked to him, his smirk becoming a little wider. True. But it is his choice, and you and I can both see that he'll choose to go. Every time. Shizun wasn't in his class. He wasn't surprised. It was a 4-year program. Children entered when they were 6 or 8, took on the program for 4 years, graduated and became genin. Shizun was on her last semester. He'd gotten in when he was 6, being an orphan with no income outside of village-funded programs and a trust fund left to the Hokage. He'd been eligible for the early enrollment. It was a village hashtag to give orphan children the head start of becoming shinobi, and getting paid as early as possible, a surefire way to keep themselves from starving. In reality, it was the easiest source of new recruits considering how many orphans a military village had. He'd failed the graduation exam twice and managed to get in on his 3rd, which is why his classmates and genin team had been with people his own age. This time he was starting absurdly early. The only person that had managed to get in this early was Hatake Kakashi, and he was so good he'd managed to graduate in a single year. Getting on a team at age 5. From what he could recall, the only one that could match that was Itachi, and even he had gotten in at age 6 and graduated at age 7. Hopefully, he'd be able to match Kakashi's little feat. The way he saw it, if he could graduate by 5, become a genin, he could be a chunin as early as 6 years old, and start training for the jounin trials to take them at 8 or 9. With that rank it would be enough to wiggle himself into some of the village vaults to get access to techniques that would let him join the Hunter Nin squad by the time he hit 12, which is when things should start kicking into the proverbial high gear. The Hunter Nins were the elite of the elite. The best any village had to offer. They were the ninja, meant to kill other ninja on a daily basis. Konoha, at the height of its power, held somewhere around 100 genin, 350 to 500 chunin, about 150 to 200 jounin and 70 to 100 umbu, but they only ever had 20 hunter ninjas. The reason for this was twofold. Firstly, because they were just that strong, and secondly because a hunter ninja's loyalty must be absolutely beyond question. Given that they had to go on the most high-risk missions, tracking down and killing other ninja, some of these A or even S-class targets to bring in that money to the village coffers when they killed ninja from other villages that had posted the bounty, this ninja could be, and were in fact authorized to be gone for months at a time. Which would suit him perfectly. With this plan, he wouldn't meet his friends. Not until much later at any rate. As it was, he was staying as far away from Sasuke and Sakura as possible. Avoiding anything that might change them. He wanted them as close to what they were as he could get. So, he wouldn't meet them, any of them. But he had to do this. The kind of freedom the hunter Nin enjoyed was exactly what he needed to contact all the other Jinchuriki, get a bead on Akatsuki and kill Tobi. This was the plan, now he just had to make it happen. Alright kids, settle down. The teacher marched in, an older man with a salt and pepper hair and beard that kinda reminded him of Asuma-sensei, only it went around his mouth too. Some of you may notice we've gotten a new student. I'd like you all to give a warm welcome to Naruto-san here. He'll be with us for the next few years, we hope. Just one buddy. The blonde smiled, waving at a bunch of faces he didn't recognize. Nice to meet ya. Alright class, I'll be passing you your class schedules and programs. Each of you, for the next class, must have read, and at least be able to discuss the general theory behind the basic arts of shinobi combat. As Naruto took his paper, droning out the teacher, he read over the subjects, reassigning his own time period for mastering and learning these assignments. The Sharingan, you say? Sarutobi mused, not even looking up from his file, the stench of tobacco wafting up from his pipe to permeate the room. Or the Makudan? The Kunoichi replied. He looked into the book last week, and since then his interest in both bloodlines has only increased. There aren't many public works on it, given how few ever faced either ability and survived, but he's digging them up, like he's looking for something specific. I wonder what that boy's getting himself up to. Why would a 4-year-old be so interested in the abilities of our late founders? I don't know. Though for now, his interest seems to be little more than a passing fancy. I just thought you should know Hokage-sama. Sarutobi nodded. Good. Keep me appraised of anything more you find odd. The more information we have, the easier it may be for Inoichi to treat him should it ever be necessary. Understood, sir. The young woman turned, leaving Sarutobi to his files for the time being. By the time the academy was over, Naruto was anxious to get back to his apartment in order to start the long road of getting his body back into some kind of shape. He'd gotten tired from running up and down stairs. Stairs. True, for his 4-year-old self these stairs were about the equivalent to some tall sets of bleachers or something that he really had to lift his leg to get up over it, but still. Freaking stairs. He needed to get back into shape and quick. He moved to step out the door when he felt something tugging at his collar, holding him back from leaving. Surprised, he paused, turning to look over his shoulder to see young Shizune holding onto him. Where do you think you're going, Nara-chan? Home. Why was she glaring at him? No, it's your first day, that means you have to go get the school IDs. I knew you'd forget. That's why I came down here. Yeah, can I do that tomorrow? I'm kinda tired, Shizune. You should really get it today. She begrudged. That thing's important and tells everyone you're a member of the academy to be allowed on school grounds. Without it, some of the guards might not let you in if they think you're trying to spy on Konoha teaching methods. He struggled not to snicker. Is that what they all thought when they were kids? Yeah, it kinda had been. Spying on the academy. Any spy that came back with the important Konoha Academy teaching curriculum would probably get stabbed for incompetence. It was a tab on all prospective shinobi, so that strategists and mathematicians like Shika could properly determine Konoha's potential military growth based on statistical analysis, along with the academy passing average. If numbers weren't up to snuff, or if the genin were coming out below standards, those IDs and school records would be the first piece of evidence to be gathered. Really. I promise I'll get it tomorrow, Nachan. Alright, she sighed before she reached around and coiled her arm over his shoulder to ruffle his hair. Come on, let's get something to eat, then I'll walk you home. He didn't want to waste time. He wanted to get the ball rolling, and the faster he did that the better. But, you never really know when the next time or rain check really will be the last one. He'd learned that one the hard way. He smiled, the warm display as pleasant as ever as he looked at this younger little stranger. Sounds great. Chapter 5. If there's one thing Naruto knew, it was that the Hokage had people watching him. Most of the time it was for his own protection. This time it was for both his protection and to keep an eye on any odd developments he might demonstrate after the incident as Tsunade and Dan had taken to calling it. One thing he couldn't afford was Gigi getting suspicious of him. It would cause him to waste too much time, and would make things all sorts of too complicated. So, obviously, he needed a place to get away from the prying eyes for a bit. Somewhere he could give his Umbu guards, wherever they were, the proverbial slip for a few minutes. And this place was none other than his own bathroom. It was the one place that none of his guards followed him. Not only was it in the middle of the apartment so no one could really get in without walking through the walls and giving away their infiltration through the chakra spike such a technique would require, but there was the more obvious issue of privacy. In a village full of people that could turn invisible, teleport, see through walls and find 1,000,001 other ways to spy on you without being seen, it was almost an unwritten rule even without the hang-ups of basic human decency. One Ero Sennin hadn't applied to the onsens in his own little version of the rulebook, but to digress. He was now in his bathroom, doing something he was probably better at by this point, than breathing and walking at the same time. Seals. He was rapidly discovering that no matter how much he pushed himself, there's only so much a 4-year-old body is capable of. At the very best, he would barely be able to take on a seasoned genin at this point. He was just too small. He didn't have enough power behind his limbs to throw a kunai or shuriken at blinding speed, or punch someone unconscious. A full-on adult civilian could take his blows with relative ease, and his chakra reserves were nowhere near where they were when he graduated the first time, so even his ninjutsu arsenal was limited. He was good enough to pass the academy, that was for damn sure, but not much beyond that. But, if there was one thing he could still do, it was seals. And seals were more useful than people gave them credit for. He wasn't gonna do a lot, that would draw way too much attention. He wouldn't even do something that would be visible for a while. He was gonna start to condition his body for nature chakra. Nature chakra was a potent, powerful force no matter who wielded it. It wasn't on par with the power he'd wielded when he and Kurama were of one mind, nothing ever would be, but it was a weapon he still had available to him. One that when mastered, was damn near unstoppable. The problem with nature chakra, of course, was its inherent risk. You turned to stone. As a rule, you needed massive reserves of human chakra to even attempt the technique, which was why it was so little known. Few ninja ever managed to have that much chakra, and those that did had other weapons in their arsenal that made this little-known hermit technique seem like a waste, especially given the amount of control needed, something that people of such reserves didn't necessarily have in the first place. When one first started training with nature chakra, that was the most dangerous part. Nature was everywhere, all around the person. So, the moment one opened themselves up to that power, it was like opening a pair of massive floodgates, and the whitewash is what normally took people completely by surprise and turned them to stone. The key was learning how to open those floodgates just enough, so as to allow the body's own natural human chakra to water it down just right. Too thick and you're half an animal, too thin, and it's not having any effect. There was no way he was gonna risk turning to a stone statue in the middle of his bathroom before he could even start getting ready for Toby. He didn't have the chakra, he didn't have that stick to whack himself on the head, he didn't have anything. All he had was a little seal that would act as a sieve. One that would slowly trickle little droplets of that chakra into his system every day. There was no guarantee it would have any long-term effects, but at this stage, until time could bring about its natural changes, he would hold out hope that this thing would give him a bit of an edge when it was time to learn to do it properly. He'd traveled through time on more far-fetched hopes. He finished with a bit of a flourish, blowing lightly on the ink that now decorated his shin to dry it. Few people would look there. It was only a few seconds before he felt that familiar, welcome friend coursing through his veins again. Lowering the leg of his pants back down, he flushed the toilet to finish the theatrics show before stepping out into the hallway ready to get some sleep. He was gonna meet his last teacher tomorrow. 7 months. In 7 months, the boy had burned a way clear through the academy's curriculum, passing every test ever placed in front of him with flying colors. It was only written exams that seemed to give him any pause, but tests of strength, skill and stealth, especially stealth, he seemed to push right through them as though he should be teaching the instructor. There had only ever been a handful of exceptional academy students like this. The prodigal scion of the Uchiha clan heads being the most recent. Hatake Kakashi was the one before him, driven to such lengths by his own intense drive to be better than his father, who had brought shame to the prestige of the Hatake clan name. Tsukumo himself was another exceptional student, but it had only been expected. The Hatake clan was one of the last to join the village system, the last vanguard of the old way, the times of endless, unremitting war. Compared to that, the academy was probably a relaxing warm-up exercise. There were a few others that had managed to demonstrate well enough aptitude to push through the academy in quick succession. Nothing nearly as exceptional as a single year, but in 2 or so, give or take a month. But one thing Orochimaru knew was that each one of these people that pushed themselves so hard had one thing in common: a drive. They were driven to such extremes. It wasn't by choice, it wasn't by mere happenstance. They pushed themselves because something made them believe that they had to do this. That they had something to prove or accomplish. With the Uchiha, it had been a wish to get away from the clan. Fugaku was a strict disciplinarian even by clan standards. The young prodigy had sought the freedom of a genin team, of missions that would extend their reach beyond the walls of Konoha. The Uchiha had wanted an escape. Hatake had wanted to outrun the memory of his father. Tsukumo had wanted to drive himself into the heart of Konoha and plant his clan's proverbial flag as to declare that even though he was not a founder of this village, none would look down or attempt to usurp the prestige of the Hatake clan that had beaten back both the Senjuo and Uchihas many times over the years. But, for the life of him, he could not determine what it was that drove Naruto. And something was indeed driving him. He stayed up all night studying ninjutsu scrolls, reading history books, sharpening his kunai training. It was more than one occasion where Orochimaru and the Umbu guarding him felt compelled to put him to sleep with a genjutsu, ones that, every day, were getting increasingly more difficult to pull off. It would be years before he could, in actuality, shrug off one of his sleeping illusions, of course. But the fact that he was able to not only detect, but offer at least a token resistance was remarkable. He was no slacker when it came to the subtle art of genjutsu. But still, the driving force behind Naruto's sheer desperation in passing through this process as quickly as possible, or to be as strong as possible, was one that he simply could not discern. Not only that, but the ever-present hostility he harbored towards him had not abated in the slightest. All his defenses came up like an iron wall whenever he even heard the Sanin's voice. Coming from a child, whose first impression was a toothless smile, and a grubby, drool-covered hand reaching for his hair, who with a giggle finally tugged on it hard enough to make him wince, it was a startling change for him to witness. In truth, he was somewhat bothered by it. Mostly because he knew just how easy such a look could grace many features. He'd killed a lot of people. Most sensei knew about, and if he didn't, Tsunade did. But what he did in his professional life for the sake of the village, and worse, for his own ambitions, had taken him to dark places, places he may not have crawled out of in one piece had it not been for key moments that had pulled him back from the precipice of oblivion he'd been standing on at points in his life. If Naruto ever knew about those, then it would be very easy for him to look at him with those eyes. Easy for him, for sensei, for a lot of people that halfway mattered. And that did bother him in several ways. Not the least of which was that whomever had altered Naruto's memories might have at least an inkling, and to give those memories to a boy, who's to say he or she couldn't just go blathering on to everyone? That worried him. Still, they didn't know, for now at least, and he was grateful for that. He picked up a file, one that was steadily growing in size since he started it 7 months ago, pulling free the pad in order to jot down the notes of this last week. Subject: demonstrating remarkable aptitude for the academy stealth exercises. Naruto-chan. The second he walked into the class, he heard Shizen's voice, finding her at the top row, seated next to a handful of other students. He smiled, waving and smiling a little more when he realized she had reserved a seat for him. Marching up, he laughed as she ruffled his hair. This is totally unfair, you know. She bemoaned. I gotta sit here for 4 years and you just up and get through this thing in less than one. I'm just awesome that way. He replied, showing off those pearly whites as he took his seat. Yeah, well, we'll see how well you handle Zae-sensei. She's the toughest teacher here. Yeah, right. Naruto scoffed. She can't be on my case any more than Irika-sensei was when I was here. Shizune offered a shrug, her face saying just how confident she was in the fact that Naruto would be eating those words. That him? The voice brought Naruto's eyes to the other side of his adopted sister, looking at a rather scruffy-looking Inuzuka kid. No jacket like Kiba, a bit thinner than he remembered Kiba being too, though, come to think of it, that could have been the jacket. His dog was definitely a sight bigger than Akamaru had been, reaching the kid's knee already, whereas Akamaru had been small enough to prop on Kiba's head. He squinted at the 4-year-old. He doesn't look so tough. Shizune smacked him on the shoulder. He's 4. What the hell did you expect? Sticking his tongue out and making a face, Naruto let some of his natural immaturity shine through as he joined the rebuke in his own way, out of sight of Shizune, of course. He's supposed to be taller. And you're supposed to be smarter. She deadpanned. Naruto helped by continuing to make faces. Before anything more could be said, the doors opened. Sit down, all of you. The words weren't shouted, they were barely even heard all the way up top where he, Shizune, and some of the other students were sitting, but never, in his life, had Naruto ever heard a room go as quiet as a crypt as fast as this room had. Every student sat in their chairs like they were falling into a regiment's formation. The woman that marched into the room was not what Naruto was expecting. She had something akin to a bowl-cut hairstyle, like Guy or Lee, only long enough to reach down to her neck, chocolate brown hair, wrinkles that were as carved into her skin as Sarujiji's, and the most distinguishing feature of all. She's practically shorter than me. He hadn't realized that he'd spoken out loud until the room, as quiet as it was, seemed to grow even quieter somehow, and every eye swiveled around to look at him. How this was accomplished without anyone moving a muscle he'd never know. Zae, as he remembered her name, didn't seem to let it affect her at all as she marched up towards her desk, speaking. It seems they taught you a good grasp of the obvious in the lower academy tiers, Uzumaki. Now let's see if we can teach you something a little above the level of potty training. It was a joke. One that pissed him off, but that he knew quite a few people would have been laughing at. Hell, he'd be laughing at it, if he wasn't the victim, that is. So why couldn't he even hear a snicker? He couldn't hear or see any movement. In fact, the only thing moving in the room, unseen to all, was Inu, who winced in his hiding spot, remembering just what it was to take class with this woman. Well, now that our introductions are all finished, we'll all be heading outside for some weapons practice. Now the class started moving, smiles flitting about here and there at the prospect of abandoning these books for a little while. Smiles that were quickly wiped clean. But before we get to that boring old stuff, we'll have a fun little pop quiz to get those minds working. Doesn't that sound nice? Zae chirped with the most pleasant smile you could ever see on someone's face. The groans seemed to feed that smile. Naruto could somehow tell this was going to be a very miserable 3 months. At the end of the day, as they were all getting ready to head on home, Zae-sensei's voice cut through the classroom chatter as easily as it had at the start of the day. Mr. Uzumaki, please stay here for a moment, I'd rather speak to you in private. Shizune threw him an apologetic look, but he smiled and waved anyway. What was the worst a teacher could do to him, really? He sat and waited. Student after student filed out as Zae-sensei gathered her own things, getting ready to leave herself. Finally, as the last of the students left. Sorry I called you short, he said. You didn't call me short. You called yourself short while comparing my height to yours. And there is a difference, she replied, finishing gathering her things before she grabbed her papers and walked up to him. She stared at him for a second or two before she pulled her glasses free from the bridge of her nose and wiped at them. Now, I'm going to give you the same speech I've given to more students than I should have since I've been teaching here, and I expect you'll, in the end, prove as stubborn as they were and give me roughly the same answer, and quietly mutter about how I don't know what I'm talking about, but holding out on a prayer, here goes nothing. Might be, you're the first surprise. How about you go out and play for a few more years, Naruto blinked. The question, put so strangely, caught him a little flat, making him answer the first thing that came to mind. There's no time for that. Now, that's a curious answer, because now is the time for it. Later is when there won't be time. You're 4 years old, you shouldn't be in here training how to slice open a man's neck, but out there she looked like she was about to go on something of a tangent when he interrupted. I'm not quitting. He appreciated the thought, really. But she just didn't understand. No one would understand that he really didn't have any time. Every second was precious. She made a bit of a face, half exasperated, half resigned. Well, at least you don't seem as stiff and boring as the last two of you that came through here. We'll see each other tomorrow then. Naruto nodded, hopping down from his seat to walk out of the class. Zae waited for him to leave before turning her eyes to the side, peering into a corner of the room. Kakashi. She could almost feel said corner stiffen. Be a dear and do your old academy sensei a favor. Could you get in contact with Orokuan and tell him to get in touch? He never writes anymore. There was silence for a moment before the corner spoke. How the hell do you do that? She smiled. Because my dear, no matter how old you get, you never forget the basics. She began to leave. I'm not boring, you know. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.